I'm Daniel Marin. Thank you so much for joining us for this in-depth look at the future of school funding in Texas as legislation to create education savings accounts reaches a critical point at the Texas Capitol. This is a top priority for Governor Greg Abbott. The plan would give parents the option to put taxpayer money toward private school education. Now we're bringing you extended interviews with the governor and State Representative James Tallarico, who is strongly opposed to the legislation. We'll also hear from parents on both sides of the issue. We'll begin with Governor Abbott. I'm here with Governor Greg Abbott and parents in support of education savings accounts. We have Monica Hess and her 7-year-old son Kenneth, Shanera Morrison and her 11-year-old son Gavin, and Celeste Green and her 7-year-old daughter Heike. Thank you all so much for being with us. Governor, we're going to begin with you. You've made it clear that this is the priority this legislative session, passing education savings accounts. You have parents on board with the plan here. What do you say to parents and teachers who maybe are not on board? We've heard from some who are concerned about what this could mean for public schools.
Well, for one, I'm supporting school choice because I visited with parents like this across the entire state of Texas, and they have a hunger and a need for school choice for the children. Listen, the reality is one size does not fit all when it comes to education. There are families that have 2 or 3 or 4 kids, and a public school may be right for one, but a private school may be right for another. Homeschool may be right for a third, and no one knows better what's right for their child than their own parent. But listen, I know because of false information out there, there are a lot of concerns that either parents or teachers may have. Let me allay those concerns real quick. For one, people may be concerned, oh gosh, school choice is going to decimate our public schools and destroy them. Nothing could be further from the truth for 2 reasons. One, we're going to fully fund public schools this session, providing more funding than ever before and a higher teacher pay raise than ever in the history of our state because we want the best teachers in our classrooms and our public schools. Second, we're going to have separate pots of money, one for public schools, one for school choice. We're not going to take a single penny from public schools to pay for school choice. And the last thing is this, the size of the program is smaller than the charter school program in the state of Texas. Charter schools haven't destroyed public schools, neither will school choice. Another way people should see this, and that is more than 30 states in the United States, they already have school choice, and it hasn't destroyed public schools in those states. And in fact, the state with the largest school choice program in the United States ranks #1 for public education in the United States. You can have both great public schools and good school choice. Brings me to my last point. My real goal here, in addition to helping these parents, is to put Texas on a pathway to being ranked #1 for educating our kids.
Governor, I want to follow up on something you mentioned there, 2 pots of money. Why not just put the $1 billion into public schools? Many of them are financially strapped.
Because we're going to be putting far more than $1 billion into public schools. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be fully funding public schools. We will be providing the largest increase to public education than ever before. Per pupil funding will be at an all-time high. Teacher pay will be at an all-time high. So we will use all the funds necessary to ensure that we are fully funding public education and ensuring that our public schools will be competitive with private schools and with homeschools.
Celeste, why are you on board with education savings accounts?
Well, I have 5 kids. I am a 2nd-generation homeschooler. It all started back when I was a child in Oregon. We homeschooled there because homeschooling was illegal in Texas at that time, and we've come a long way. When my oldest son Joseph was in junior high, he experienced violence, and I was unable to resolve that, so I had to take him out of school. I also worked at that time as a forensic psychologist, and I was fortunate enough to be able to quit my job and homeschool him. There were no other school districts to transfer him to, and the local Catholic school didn't have any openings. So, homeschooling was the only other option there. And so that was okay. I felt confident homeschooling my child, I felt confident with my ability to teach him, the education savings account would help us.
Shanera, I want to come to you on the topic of the amount of money. $10,000 is roughly what it's going to be, could be if it passes. Is that enough money, do you think, for what you would like for your child?
As I've said many times before, anything helps. Whether it's $1 or $50 or $10,000, anything towards my son's education is beneficial for me and for him.
Governor, I want to come to you on this question of equity. The $10,000 might not really cover tuition at a lot of schools around the state, and a lot of cities around the state don't even have private options. What do you say to those parents?
Well, again, that's a lot of false information that needs to be corrected, because the fact of the matter is I've researched the issue. And most private schools across the state of Texas, they cost less than $10,000. That point aside, there are many others that may cost more than $10,000, and they would be willing to provide a scholarship that would make up the difference. This is going to provide unbelievable access, unprecedented access. There's something else, though, and that is when a program like this is created, that will lead to the creation of some new schools that can provide that opportunity. Another falsehood is, well, there's rural regions of the state of Texas where this simply is not available. And that's untrue in so many regions of the state of Texas that are rural that I've been in. I'll give you Athens, Texas as one example. I was at a school there. Athens has a population of about 12,000 people. And yet, they have a private school that parents needed to take their child out of public school because the child in first grade was coming home from school repeating 4-letter cuss words. And parents knew at that time it violated their values, and they wanted to move their child into a setting that reached his values. And there was a private school like that there in Athens, Texas. In Alpine, Texas, in small little towns across the state, there are many opportunities for school choice for parents.
You mentioned the research that goes into building a massive program like this. What does the private school community say to you? Are they ready for this? Are they ready for the influx? Because it is up to them whether to accept these children or not.
The private school community is hungry for this because they know that they provide an important value to the education equation. One is because of the type of education they provide. Another is because different schools meet different needs of different parents. You know, one school is, again, doesn't matter if it's public or private, one size is not going to fit all for every student. But we know there's going to be schools out there that will meet the needs of all these students. But there's something else that is very important here, of what we found in other states that have school choice. And that is when school choice is entered into the education equation, it means that the private schools do better. It means that the public schools do better because there's competition involved. Competition makes everything better, including education, and that's what we want. We want the best education product in the United States. School choice is a pathway to achieve that excellent product.
Many private schools are attached to a church or a religious organization. Do you worry that this blurs the line between church and state?
The United States Supreme Court made clear that it does not. And so there's no constitutional issue here whatsoever. What is at issue here, however, is that there are some parents, they want their children to learn more than just their ABCs. They also want their children to learn values. Some parents are able to achieve that by homeschooling. Other parents are able to achieve it by finding a school that's right for the child that will also teach values. One thing our country needs at this time, and that is character development by our children. And character development can be done through schools that educate students about more than just math and science, but also genuine values that will make them stronger participants in our democracy.
But what do you say to parents who feel like public money shouldn't be subsidizing religious teachings?
So the fact of the matter is the Supreme Court has ruled on that issue. What the Supreme Court ruled was actually the opposite, and that is to exclude schools because of religion would be violating the Constitution. And so what we have to do, we have to make school choice available to all schools out there that are accredited, by the way, in order to qualify. But for all accredited schools in the state of Texas, they will provide an option for parents to choose the pathway that's best for them, understanding this very important point. And that is, all of these parents right here, they know far better what their children need than does any educator, any principal, any administrator. We put the power of parents first, which, by the way, when you have engaged parents, that almost always leads to a better education outcome for children.
You campaigned against members of your own party who opposed this plan in the last legislative cycle. Millions of dollars was spent, some of your own time was spent at these campaign events. Why is passing this so important to you? Is it something personal?
It is important to me as governor because one of my goals, in addition to the trophies behind you that show that Texas ranks #1 for economic development for 13 years in a row, I have a responsibility as governor for Texas to rank #1 for education for 13 years in a row. And so I will continue my mission until we achieve that goal. And then in addition to that, I've talked to these parents who are with us today. I've talked to thousands of parents across the state. Parents are hungry for this. In ballot initiative after ballot initiative, voters have said they want school choice. In Texas, every demographic group, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, urban, suburban, rural, doesn't matter who you are, where you are in the state of Texas, majorities of Texans want school choice. It's time for school choice to pass in Texas.
We've only got a couple of minutes left here. Governor, you mentioned voters want this. Why not just put the creation of the program itself up to voters?
That's the way California is run. They have ballot initiatives on so many laws, hundreds of laws. Let me tell you something. One thing I will achieve as governor is to make sure Texas never becomes California.
Monica, I'll give you the last word here. For those still unconvinced and those who feel like maybe this isn't the best thing for the state, it's not the best thing for our public schools, what do you say?
I would say consider that every family, just like those of us up here in the state of Texas, deserves to have the right to choose what's best for their child and their family. And we appreciate the governor helping us to achieve that.
Okay, Governor, any parting words on the topic for those who are unsold?
People try to cast school choice as choosing either school choice or supporting public schools. That's a false choice. We're doing more this session than ever to support our public schools with more pay for teachers, with more funding for schools, as well as creating a school choice program for parents who have found that their local public school, for whatever reason, just does not work for their child. We're going to empower those parents, we're going to empower our public teachers, and we are going to put Texas on a pathway to being ranked #1 in the United States for educating our children.
All right, Monica Hess, Shanera Morrison, and Celeste Green, thank you so much for joining us. Governor Abbott, thank you so much for your time. We're now exploring the opposing view to education savings accounts. We just heard from Governor Greg Abbott, who strongly supports the plan. Now my extended interview with State Representative James Tallarico and concerned parents. We are joined by Texas State Representative James Tallarico, Democrat from House District 50. We also have Bree Rolfe, who works for a public school district and is also a former high school educator. Also joined by Alicia Markham, a trustee on a public school board, but also the parent of 2 children, an elementary school student and a middle school student. And we also have with us Linda Ramirez, who has 2 young students as well, and Yasmin Anderson, the parent of an 8th grader. Thank you so much all for joining us. Mr. Tallarico, we're going to begin with you, Representative. We heard from a group of parents who really like the idea of getting some help to provide their child the type of education that they feel is best for them. Can you explain your opposition to education savings accounts? Why not let parents just choose?
Well, private school vouchers are a scam that will take our tax dollars out of our underfunded public schools and give those tax dollars to unaccountable private schools that primarily serve the wealthy few. Greg Abbott is calling this school choice, which sounds great. I think all of us are for school choice, but this is not school choice. It's the school's choice, because private schools can deny admission to any kid for any reason they want. So how is it choice when the private school has all the power? How is it choice when a majority of counties in the state of Texas don't have a single private school in them? How is it choice when private schools don't have to provide special education services or transportation? And how is it choice when the voucher doesn't even cover the full cost of tuition at most private schools in Texas? So, you know, I used to be a middle school teacher before I ran for office. I taught on the west side of San Antonio, which is one of the poorest zip codes in our state. If you gave my former students on the west side of San Antonio a $10,000 voucher, there's still no way they could afford a $20,000 a year tuition bill. But here's the catch. That wealthy family that is already sending their kid to a $20,000 a year private school, they're eligible for this program too. And so they're going to get a discount, a $10,000 discount at our expense. That's why I call vouchers welfare for the wealthy, and that's why I'm encouraging all Texans to call their representatives and tell them to reject this scam and fully fund our public schools.
Proponents say that this isn't really taking money from public schools. They say, well, the governor has described it as two pots. I would imagine you don't agree with that?
I don't know what the governor's talking about. This is all from general revenue, which is all taxpayer funds. It's all coming from the same pot of money. And I have confirmed with the author of the bill that the $1 billion that we're putting toward private school tuition for wealthy families could be going to our underfunded neighborhood schools. And I just think that's an unconscionable, immoral decision when our schools are struggling to stay open as we speak.
Yasmin, explain your opposition to education savings accounts.
My daughter is in 8th grade, and because of public school and her access to special education services since 2nd grade, she is thriving. Her IEP outlines the way she learns and the accommodations that are needed to ensure her success. And without that document and without the supports of special education, she wouldn't be where she is today, and dare I say, she would not like school. And this would then lead her to stop going, push back, all of the things you see when students don't get what they need in a learning environment. It's that school to prison pipeline. So by taking this money, taxpayer dollars, and funneling it to the wealthy, instead of giving all Texans the right to education, it's completely absurd and wrong in my view.
Alicia, you have dual roles as a school board member, also as a parent. What are your views?
So I have 2 children who receive special education services. My oldest child is in 7th grade, and he has received services from the time he could be in early childhood special education at 3 years old. When it was time for him to enter kindergarten, I was a young mom, new to navigating the school system. He was my first child. And so I wanted to make sure that I looked at every option for him to make sure he was going to be set up for success. So of course I looked at our neighborhood public school, but I also went out and looked at charter schools and private schools. And I only looked at schools that promoted themselves as accepting children with disabilities. So some of the responses I heard back from those schools ranged from, we don't have the resources to support your child. We want our students to have potential in something, implying my child had no potential in anything. The charter school that we actually, through the lottery, won a seat in, brought in a regional director to convince us not to send our child there, and ended up telling us that if we chose to send him there, they would teach him in a room by himself. I know firsthand that these schools do choose who they want to attend. My child was rejected from every school that said they potentially would accept a child like him. I also heard responses of, we do take children with disabilities, but not children like your son. So then that begs the question, well, what kind of child do you take? So I'm opposed because I know firsthand that these schools don't take children like my son, and most children who receive services, they don't have the resources and they're not going to go out and get them. My child has thrived in public school. Both of my children have thrived in public school. My older son is entering his teenage years, and even in a challenging time with a disability and entering teenage years, his campus and our district has gone to great lengths to make sure he has all the resources he needs to still be on a successful path. So I know public schools work. They have the resources. The money that could be funding our public schools, we're asking to subsidize private tuition with money that could be going into our public schools. So the reality is we have school choice in Texas. It already exists. But what we're asking is, do we want the taxpayers to subsidize private tuition for private schools that a majority of them are never going to be able to access?
Representative Tallarico, I wanted to ask you, you've spoken about your Christian faith. Many of these schools are going to be religious, so these private schools. What do you say to the parents who would like to send their child to a school that aligns with their faith?
Well, no one's stopping them from sending their kid to a private school. We already have school choice in Texas. Not only can a parent choose to send their child to a private school, they can also choose a public charter school or an early college high school or a magnet school or an academy or a career and technical school, in addition to their neighborhood school. So we want options for parents. The question here is, where should our taxpayer dollars go? And we shouldn't send our taxpayer dollars to schools that aren't accountable to the taxpayers. Private schools don't have to follow the same rules. They don't have to accept the same students. They don't have to take the same test. And that's a problem for me as a lawmaker. Taxpayers of all kinds pay for our schools, and there needs to be transparency and accountability for those taxpayer funds.
Bree, I want to ask you your view as a former teacher.
So my current role, I serve students experiencing homelessness and in foster care. And my biggest opposition is my students that I serve now will never benefit from this bill. And you know, people keep saying parent choice, and that's great. Parents have choices already, but what about the students whose parents can't make choices for them, or who don't even have enough money to put food on the table? And in our public schools, I currently work out of a wonderful middle school where we work with social workers and support staff. And one of the things that when you take money from public schools, we lose all of our wraparound services and support for our most vulnerable students. And I've been a public educator in Texas for 17 years. I've worked in 2 different districts, and I have seen how public schools can be a place of magic and transformation for the most vulnerable students. And I have had the gift of watching that transformation. And most Texans do not want this bill bipartisan. There are people on both sides that don't want it. And if you fully fund our public schools, we can do great things. And we haven't had a basic allotment increase since 2019. This budget surplus is them taking money from our public schools. And they need to put it back into the communities so we can have community schools that thrive and become places that are safe and nourishing for our students.
Linda, I've seen you nodding your head. Where does your opposition to education savings accounts come from?
So I'm not from US, so basically the country I'm from, that we only fund public school. So this is really weird things for me, first thing. And then the second thing is because my kids are in public school, they also need special ed support. So and then my school district is like majority of kids are from Title I, so they need all the resources they can get. And then, but however, our school superintendent just announced that we are on 13 million deficit on the financial budget. So when every school district don't have enough money, and then we are still funding private school, I don't know the math. It's not working for me at all.
Representative, the governor mentioned that he feels competition makes everything better in terms of public school and private school. Your response to that?
I like competition, but only when it's fair. Private schools don't have to follow the same rules, don't have to take the same tests, don't have to accept the same students. It's like a football game where one team has unlimited timeouts and 12 guys on the field. So we can have competition, but it's got to be a level playing field. I do want to pick up on what was already mentioned. There is bipartisan opposition to this voucher scam. Republicans and Democrats oppose this scam. The only people who are for it is Greg Abbott and his billionaire megadonors. Jeff Yass, an out-of-state billionaire, gave Greg Abbott $12 million last year to pass this scam so that they can privatize our schools and make money off of our kids. So we've all got to come together, regardless of our political party, regardless of our region, regardless of our background, to reject this billionaire scam and fully fund our neighborhood schools.
We're running out of time here. Representative Tallarico, I'll leave the last word to you. What would you say to those still on the fence, still undecided? How would you persuade them?
Don't take our word for it. Go look at the other states that have tried these private school voucher scams. They tried it in Arizona and it blew a giant hole in their state budget. It grew in cost year after year and it bankrupted their public education budget. They did it in Florida and 70% of the users were wealthier families who already had their kids in private school. They did it in Indiana and the private schools just raised their tuition and profited off the taxpayers. So we don't want this scam in Texas. This is going to be on the House floor on Wednesday. We need Texans to show up. We need Texans to call their state reps and their state senators and their governor and tell them to reject this scam and fully fund our neighborhood schools.
All right. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for Texas Education Funding the Future. I'm Daniel Marin. Take care.